Corsair, our non-stimulant, thermogenic, and recomposition agent. Corsair is a super cool product because it's gonna help you utilize turning your white adipose tissue, which is for storage of fat, into brown adipose tissue, which is gonna help with energy production. So this is great to use for a competition prep or in your weight loss phase. So you can stack it with a stimulant-based thermogenic, or you could also use it in your off-season or muscle building phase to help keep you lean and mean. Corsair.
All right, Evan ate his Wheaties today. All right, guys. Well, we just had our pre-podcast chat, and today we're going to have some fun. So welcome to the ProPhysique Code with Evan Wells, Lexi Maitland. Today is February 27th, 2024, and we are just days away from the Arnold Classic.
Yes, we are. It's a busy few weeks for us, isn't it?
Yes, and it's been much anticipated. So we'll talk a little bit about our Command the Stage, and we'll talk a little bit about what's going to go on at the Arnold. And then we're going to talk about some topics in the sport, things like fat-burning magic creams, fasted cardio, how often you should compete, and we'll talk about if they're over or underrated. And those aren't all. So stick around because we have a lot to talk about today. But this was our annual Command the Stage event, which is maybe misunderstood, but it is a all-encompassing contest prep weekend. We talk about the science of all aspects of nutrition, training, mindset. We do a few seminars, then we go put everything into action in the gym. Then we go spend some time together and get to know each other. And so it is a one-of-a-kind event. It is not the same thing as a posing seminar or a training workshop. So Lexi, let me get your thoughts, because you actually had some pretty cool things happen with some of your clients showing up with little Team Lexi shirts, and I love that.
Yeah. Actually, the one of the girls that showed up, she's the one that made some of those shirts a while back. But yeah, oh my gosh, I mean this wholeheartedly. I feel like this was the best event we have had yet. I mean, all of our events have been great, but like they just seem to get better and better. But my clients that came, I mean, they had nothing but wonderful things to say. And I think that the biggest thing that stood out to me this year is I felt like it was so, I mean, we had a good group of people. It wasn't like it was tiny by any means, but there was so much like one-on-one and intimacy, especially at the gym when we split up with groups. We had like 3 people in every group. So, we'd rotate around and those 3 people would get so much one-on-one attention, at each station, whether it was posing or whether it was, with Brett or, with you or with Evan. So the quality and the intimacy there was so valuable in my opinion. And it was really cool too to see and actually meet a few of my clients in person, because the only one I had met before in person was one of my clients, Christina, and the other 3 I had never met in person. So it's always kind of fun when that happens.
Yeah, I mean, based on the quality of this event, going forward, we're going to cap it at 30 people. That is just the magic number. We've had as many as like 65, I think, in the past, and it does start to get a little bit watered down as far as like having access to every single person, all the coaches, and people with the personalities that aren't kind of more aggressive start to get just kind of pushed to the side and ignored a little bit. And it's natural. And when you get a large group of people together, there are going to be some people that are a little more kind of forward and some people a little more passive. I think of like, Stephanie Ortiz, my client that came from Puerto Rico, was a very quiet, kind of shy, unassuming girl. Thursday night, she was there quiet. But by Saturday night, she was like, chatting and talking to everybody. Had this been an event with 60 people plus all the coaches, I think she would have just got kind of, she would have just stayed to herself and felt like she didn't get a lot out of it. So I think we're going to stick to 30 people going forward. This is not an event for the masses. This is a really hands-on, and honestly, it's something that I need. I really just had an amazing weekend, an amazing time with all you guys and all the competitors.
I don't know
It was
about you
great.
guys, but these event weekends like this, and I mean, I'm sure the Arnold's going to be the same way. I just feel so like energized. Like I've been up the past couple mornings, like super early before 6, just naturally. And I'm just like excited to work. Just not that I'm not normally that way, but these events kind of give you an all new sense of like that fire.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Evan? Because this is your second year coming.
No, it was great. It was great. You know, I was big or heavily involved in the training aspect on things, and
Yeah.
one of my favorite parts of this is seeing their faces light up when everything makes sense.
Right.
When things that they've struggled with for a long time finally click for them, it's like just a light goes off in their body. It's
Yeah.
really, really fun to see. And everyone was so gracious. Everyone was thankful. I think everyone had a really good time. Obviously some people are more outgoing and other people a little more reserved. But by the end, I feel like everyone really got to know everybody. And it was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think I've been to a lot of these events, spoken at a lot of different people's events, and sometimes they can just seem very vanilla, very surface level. You just show up, you sit in a room, you get talked to all day, and you leave. And there's some value there, but the thing I love about these events is that the social interaction is like people being like, "Oh, I didn't know you guys like to have fun, and this is not what I was expecting," right? And so
Mhm.
that's for me, because it's hard to find people that share passions, share interests. So when we get together, we automatically already have that. But then you combine it with like good people, um, good morals that just, want to be positive. It really just, I mean, like you said, the energy, I hardly slept all weekend because, I wanted to be up early. We stayed out late. We were busy all day. I'm probably still just getting caught up on my sleep. The last 2 nights I've slept like 9 hours. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I've tried to get a lot of sleep these like last night, the night before, because I know the Arnold, I'm not going to get any sleep either.
yeah, right. Yeah. And then so we ended the weekend with that mock show, or well, actually we ended the weekend with the catered dinner at my house, but the mock show, having IFBB judge and Clash promoter Joe Pashkula show up, along with, Brittany Hamilton, and Daraja was posing coaching. Um, Danny Kirschka, who is one of our, employees, who is also now an NPC judge, having them just kind of guide these girls on stage, um, mock stage, albeit, get the experience of, from a judge's perspective, what are they looking for? Are you standing at the right angle? It's really invaluable because if you're going to a show and it's your first experience, it can really feel overwhelming, but when you know what to expect, it just makes it that much more enjoyable. So I'm glad we got to do all that too.
That was very valuable. Yeah, I actually last night I was editing because I did get footage from the weekend that I'm going to upload a vlog, and I got some clips of the mock show, and I was listening to Joe speak, and he was very, very good with the athletes and just telling them what to expect on stage, what the judges are looking for, what the expediter is going to, do for the athletes on stage. It was so valuable, and I was really proud too, because I know we had a wide variety of girls there. We had some girls who had competed before. And then we also had some girls who they've never competed before, let alone they just learned posing this weekend, and they got up there for the mock show. And
Right.
I think that takes a lot of guts. I was talking with my one of my clients who this was her first exposure with posing, and she was like, I don't know if I want to do the mock show. And I'm like, you know what, just do it, because I want you to leave this weekend without any regrets. And I knew she would have regretted it if she didn't put herself out there and get up there. And yeah, so I think it was great to see some of those girls up there getting outside of their comfort zone too.
Well,
One
and
of the most fun.
they're not judging. It's not a judged event. It's so some of the girls are going to wear their sports bras and their pants, and it's more about learning the right angles, learning the right pace, learning what the judges are looking for. Now, there were some girls that hit some poses, and I think we all looked around like, "Holy crap, that girl's a little superstar!" Right? So you saw Matt's girl,
Ah,
and so you saw some girls that were in pretty near contest shape, but that's not what we were looking for with this event. This was to get the experience of being stared at in a room full of people that it's hard to replicate until you get on a bodybuilding stage.
And if you
Not
can do
looking
it,
into a mirror.
if you can do it here, then you can easily do it on
Oh,
stage.
it's way more nerve wracking with
Way more
lights on and
nerve-wracking.
no hair, makeup, no tan. You're not in contest shape. You're just exposed for the world to see.
Yep. Yep.
and let alone being, I don't know, this is just me, but being in front of all that, like that group of people right? To me, that's a little bit more intimidating than going on stage and being in front of a crowd that like you don't really know. I don't know, that's may
Yeah.
just be, but that's
Well,
that's
just so you know how nerve wracking it is, Brittany Hamilton, who is a bikini Olympian, I think we're 8 weeks out from stage right now. Even she was like, "No, I just want you to look at me over here privately." And I was like, "Okay."
Mhm.
So
Oh, I did hear her say that. Yeah, she was like,
yeah.
"Hey, can you come over here and check me?" Yep.
Yeah.
Oh
So,
yeah.
I did that. I had her and I had Ariana pose because Ariana's about to start prep for Pittsburgh Pro. So like, you know, not everyone wants to get up there, but I think that's kind of also the fun of it, is that they're all under the same circumstances. So, yeah, just the whole weekend and then wrapping it up at the house, I felt like, um, I just love having everybody over all under one roof, because after like Thursday night, Friday night, by Saturday night, everybody's friends, everybody's chatting, you know, it really does take a couple days for the group to kind of like form those connections. And then I promise you, those people, some of them are going to be friends for life now. You know,
Mhm.
that's what's really fun about it.
You know what I like seeing is I connected with a few new people. Actually, like Matt's client, Chrissy, came up to me at the dinner on Saturday, and she was telling me how thankful she is that like for the podcast and all the information we put out. But like, you know, I followed her, I followed a couple of new people, and now I like when you see the people that were at the event commenting on each other's posts. They're like, "Oh my gosh,
Yep.
so great to meet you," or like, "You're doing amazing." Like, you know, they whether or not they live in the same geographical region, they're now virtual friends and probably going to be each other's biggest cheerleaders.
Mhm.
Yep. So, well, let's roll that forward into the Arnold weekend, because I think we're all leaving Thursday to
Yep.
Columbus, Ohio, where the expo starts on Friday. Friday is typically a little more calm. Saturday is full craziness because, you know, the whole town gets filled up. Um, I'll be really curious to see how busy it is. You know, last year it was kind of busy. It's still nowhere near what it was in 2019. They had the aisles nice and wide. You never had to really wait in line to walk anywhere. So I'll be curious to see. We've got some really interesting things going on with the open bodybuilding, even with the men's physique, with the bikini division. That's really the extent of what I kind of follow closely. And then it's always just good to see everybody. And, you know, it's going to be another good weekend. We got a nice Airbnb for a bunch of the coaches, so we'll have some fun.
Yeah.
It'll be great.
I'm looking forward to seeing the slapping contest. Don't they? Isn't this the expo where they
I don't
have
think so. They had
they
that 2 years ago.
they
I
did not
had, it wasn't back last year.
have okay.
Uh, don't get me wrong. I'd love to see that, but I don't know. And I haven't seen anything advertising it. Um,
Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they got rid of it. I feel like that's a big I don't know, it's just so dangerous, you know? Those people probably suffer from brain, you
you know,
know,
it's like
So's boxing, so's MMA.
now you hear about like bare knuckle boxing as a thing. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, so it's like MMA without gloves, which, okay. I don't know if these things are going to be sports that stick around. Maybe they are. I could be, I'm talking about things I don't know about, but I do like that the Arnold takes a chance and they bring in things that you don't normally see at a fitness expo. I mean, obviously the world's strongest man competition, and that's one of the main events for those world's strongest man competitors. So if you get a chance to go watch that, it's just unbelievable. You've also got, like, you know, obviously the powerlifting. The USAPL usually has their Arnold Invitational. You've got weightlifting. They have a Arnold Invitational. A lot of the sports. Even a couple of years ago, Steven got into the jiu-jitsu tournament in Ohio. Um, at the Arnold. So it's, you've got a lot of different kind of moving pieces, and it can be a little bit overwhelming the first couple times you go. But if you want to find me for Nutritionals, that's really it. I'm going to be at the NPC show most of the day Friday. I'll probably be going back and forth. The nice thing about the NPC show is that it's the hotel that hosts it is in the same building as the venue for the expo, so you can walk back and forth. Evan, you've got a young lady doing it as well.
Mhm.
So we'll be hanging out Friday. And then Saturday, the nice thing is that the pro prejudging is actually in the expo hall on the convention center stage. There's only 11 competitors, with Issa getting hurt. So that's fast as crap. Like 11 people at a pro show, that's 2 call outs and it's over. It's like 20
Yep.
minutes. So,
yeah,
and
definitely
I'm probably going to
different.
watch Ben's physique. I'm really curious because I love when the pro show doesn't have any of the favorites from the Olympia, right? It's just kind of wide open. Same thing with the men's bodybuilding, right? We're going to have Samson, who did win it last year, but you've got the Mr. Olympia champion from 2 years coming in to do it. So
Mhm.
it's throwing everything off. Um, so yeah,
That top five is going to be fun to see.
yeah. So I'll be, you know, it's just one of those things, like, until they walk out under those lights, nothing matters. Instagram, be what it'll be. They can look great 2 days out in the gym. They over underdo something, they miss their mark. That, you know, it's just, that's why bodybuilding is so exciting is because when they walk under those lights, that's when you know what's going to happen. So,
That's it.
and then other than that, the Core Nutritionals booth, I'll be there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I got the last flight out Sunday evening, so wanted to make sure I got all the juice out of this weekend. So yeah, we'll probably get into some trouble one night. I'm guessing probably Saturday night will be my night to get into some trouble. And by trouble, I mean I'm old. 2 margaritas.
I'm with you on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, if we don't have anything else to add to that, I think Lexi had a good idea for this podcast, talking about things that are topics that are over or underrated, potentially, things that are, topics of conversation within competitors in the world that are, I think some things can be thought of as like you have to do them, and some things can be thought, and what happens is there tends to be like pushback. So something will become trendy for a while, and then it will become less trendy. Some things will become popular because of anecdote or research, and they go back and forth. So it thought it would be fun to let Lexi pick a bunch of topics because, she's young.
Yeah. I feel, oh, well, I'm kind of a grandma at heart, but actually my clients even call me grandma sometimes. But
So do we
yes.
when you're not around.
What?
So do we when you're not around.
Oh, thanks. No, it's okay. I don't take it personal. But yeah, I came up with a list and we're just gonna kind of run through it and we'll give each of our takes on if it's overrated or underrated, and then we'll elaborate a little bit on each topic. So let's start off. This is a big one. I hear about this all the time, fasted cardio. So let's go around first and we'll just like each say overrated or underrated, and then we can come back and elaborate. So fasted cardio, Evan.
Overrated.
Huh?
I'm just going to be devil's advocate and say underrated.
Okay.
All right.
I'm gonna say overrated as well.
Okay, so I want to hear you guys' perspective on why it's overrated.
Do you want to go first, Evan?
Yeah. To me, it's overrated because cardio is all just time, duration, and heart rate. If you really kind of look at it, the grand scheme of things with it, to me, and me personally, and with a lot of people, it's harder to get your heart rate up earlier in the morning. It's way easier to get your heart rate up after you've been moving a little bit, after your energy's up. I think doing it post-workout is very, very good because your heart rate's already elevated. It's easier to get it up. It's easier to maintain it. Now, if you have a lot of cardio to do and need to split it up and do it in the morning, I'd probably want to do that part fasted. But as a general rule, I would say it's overrated.
Yep, I would agree with that. I think it kind of, I feel like it's a bit of a fad. I feel like a lot of people think fasted cardio is superior to cardio in a fed state. And I think it could go both ways. I think for some people like doing it first thing in the morning. Personally, I love doing cardio first thing in the morning. It's kind of like making the bed. Like when you make your bed in the morning, you're usually a little bit more productive throughout the day, or I think research says that. But same with fasted cardio. I love starting my day that way. But also like if I have a client who maybe they have to be at work super, super early, well, I probably prefer that they get a little bit of extra sleep and do their cardio later in the day, right? So I don't think like it's not an all or nothing. It's not that if you can't do fasted cardio, it's bad. I think it just comes down to a personal preference.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, for the majority of my competing career, fasted cardio was of no interest to me because it's very clear in the research that caloric expenditure is basically equal, right? So it's not that fasted cardio is going to burn more body fat. I think that's the nomenclature. Oh, you do cardio in a fasted state because you slept all night. There's no sugar in your blood. Your body's not going to use sugar for fuel. It's going to use fat. That's the prevailing theory. You hear this all the time as well. I got bad news for you people. That doesn't matter. What burns for fuel is based on the intensity of the exercise, not based on what you just ate as a meal. So fasted cardio does not burn more body fat. Now, the research actually showed that it did burn more calories from fat, but over the course of the day, that didn't matter because you actually burned more calories in a fed state doing the cardio. So it was basically equal. So why do I say it's underrated? Because for all my life, I never did fasted cardio. And now I wake up every day. And the only reason I do it fasted is because I just have no appetite at 5:30 in the morning. I have no desire to grab food and go do cardio. I wake up and I do my cardio. I'll say I feel more productive at this point in my life because I get up and move. There's something to me that's magical about getting up 5:30 to 6:30, 5:30 to 6, whenever I'm going to do it, whatever phase I'm in, I do it every day now. I feel better. I feel more productive. And I think probably for myself, I burn more calories throughout the day because I did that cardio fasted. It also decreases my appetite throughout the day. I've tried it both ways. I've tried getting up at 5:30 and working out with weights. I'm starving all day. But if I
Mhm.
get up at 5:30 and do my fasted cardio, and then I'll work a little bit, and then I'll go eat my breakfast around 7:30, my appetite is null. It's just a complete difference for hunger signaling for me. Now, granted, when you get down to 6% body fat, it doesn't matter. You're always hungry. But just for me managing my daily routine, I feel more active. I feel more vibrant. I feel more like it's just positive. Almost euphoric
Mhm.
at times from the cardio. Now, listen, when you get below 10%, 7% body fat, whatever it is, whenever we all hit that point, nothing feels great. But so that's why it's underrated to me, because for so long, I just thought it was stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like that we kind of all had like, well, for the most part, different answers for that one. Now, I think we're all gonna have this, well, I don't know. I think we're gonna all have the same answer for this one. What about, so here's our next topic. Fat burners in prep. Evan, overrated or underrated?
Overrated.
Paul?
Yeah, overrated.
Yep, I 100% agree. And I think Evan and I are probably going to have the same, like, it depends, because I think we've talked about it on the podcast a while ago. But I really only see them being like, I just feel like I think it's more so if I don't feel like it's as much like in prep. I think sometimes people like starting their like fat loss journey, if they're not a competitor, sometimes think fat burners are this miraculous thing. But I think that in prep, the only potential benefit I could see them having is going back to what you said a few minutes ago, Evan, about how if you do fasted cardio in the morning, it is a little bit harder to get your heart rate up naturally, right? So I can sometimes, like, one thing I did in prep is I took a little bit of a fat burner and a thermogenic right before I would do fasted cardio, because it would kind of help to elevate my heart rate a little bit easier when I did that
Mhm.
fasted cardio. But other than that, I don't prescribe fat burners to my clients unless that's the case and we need maybe to help get their heart rate up a little bit more, or unless they just like taking something. But I think fat burners are completely overrated.
Yeah, I think just like everything, it's a tool, right? Fat burners on their own are not going to burn fat, but what it can do is give you some energy, maybe raise your heart rate a little bit so you can actively do more work and burn more fat. Yes, they can be beneficial for that. Is it something I take at times? Sure. Is it something my clients take at times? Sure. Is it an absolute must and required? No. Is it a massive game changer? No. But if you're trying to be the best you can and you're trying to look for every little tiny thing, maybe it could be a benefit. But it's kind of like the cherry on top, right? You got to build the whole sundae first before you even worry about any of that stuff. And most people just want that quick thing. Oh, this is going to burn all my fat away. That's not the case at all with them.
Yeah,
Yep.
I actually don't like the term fat burner because it implies that you take it and you're burning fat. I like the term thermogenic, right? So thermogenic implies it increases your body temperature, which it does. Now, even though I think it's an overrated product, Doug came to me, was like, "Hey man, do you have any ideas for supplements?" And I said, "Yeah, I have an idea for a thermogenic product that I think could be beneficial for people that do cardio in the morning, and that's to help lower their cortisol and lower their appetite after." So the one that I helped formulate has Safserine and also has KSM 66, which both do those things. So, like you said, Evan and Lexi, when you're doing your morning cardio, if you want to get your heart rate up, this is something you can literally drop in the water, drink it, sip on it while you're doing your cardio, and you're going to notice your body temperature gets higher quicker. You're going to notice your focus is a little bit sharper. You're going to have great recovery after. So it's not as if in the absence of diet and training and consistency, fat burners or thermogenics are going to be a game changer for you. But the people listening to this podcast and the 3 people on this podcast, we're not interested in just doing okay, right? We want to tick all the boxes to know we did everything in our power. And there is definitely a time in prep where I start doing cardio in the morning where I'm like, man, I am beat up. What can I do? This is when core burn is going to help me get through this cardio session and get through it with some zest and be like, yes, let's go. Right. So that's exactly what you mean when you say like at certain points. So while it is completely overrated, I'm thinking in broad terms. for the average person that's not ticking all the boxes that we are ticking.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So next, well, I guess, okay, this one will probably be short and sweet, but this goes on. This is kind of a stemming off of that topic. Sweat creams. So those creams that people put on like their stomach, or I think they even make them for like your glutes or whatever. So sweat creams. Paul, Evan, what do you guys think?
Overrated, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, complete nonsense. So I don't even have a
I was like,
rating. There's
That's
zero evidence that there are any benefit to topical fat loss agents.
well,
it's
this is my response to all of this stuff. If it worked, everyone would already be doing it. It would not be some underground thing. Everyone would use it all the time if it
I've
actually did anything.
actually only ever I've gotten like I get samples of that stuff all the time thrown into goodie bags. Never have once touched it because I think it's ludicrous. But I've actually heard people tell me like that they've used them before and they've actually had like a bad reaction where like their skin will get really red and irritated. So I just don't want to mess with it from that reason too. But I think the only potential maybe like thing I could see it maybe helping with is, let's say you wake up one day and you're super, super watery and bloated. Maybe if it makes you feel good, like, and you put a little on your stomach when you're doing cardio, you sweat a little bit more. Maybe you'll sweat out a little bit of that water weight. But I think at the end of the day, they're a complete waste of money.
You
So
can't spot
there's
reduce.
two
So
products you're talking about.
yeah.
So there's the one that I've seen people just put it on their skin and they do their cardio. There's also the one that goes under the belt. That is like a skin irritant and it does cause perspiration. I'll tell you this, that one will actually make you perspire more in a spot. And so you look cool for a minute, especially if you do your abs and you're sweating under that belt and it's holding all that heat in and you're working out and you take that belt off, you'll look pretty cool for about 36 seconds, because it looks like you just got out of the sauna. There's no benefit to fat loss, but there's maybe a mental benefit. I will say there's also such a thing as the placebo effect, right? We've
Yes.
literally seen this in research where people believed they had two groups, a group that believed they were on steroids and a group that believed they were not. The group that believed they were on steroids, they trained harder, they got better results because in their mind, their work was being rewarded. So if you give someone a fat burning cream and say, this is going to make you burn more fat, you might get a placebo effect because you actually believe your work is, so you're going to work harder, you're going to hit your macros better, whatever, but, I'm not a big believer in prescribing, placebos to my clients. I
Yeah.
also would not be associated with a company that sells something like that. It's just, it's been offered to me, Lexi, that, but same thing. It's just not an interest.
Yeah, I think I said this in our last episode when we did the Q&A, but a lot of times I think what draws people to these types of products is they'll see maybe a top level athlete promoting it or, somebody that they look up to promoting it. But, you have to kind of read between the fine lines there. And most of the time that athlete got their results from the basics, training, nutrition, cardio. And, when people are associated with certain companies, they're, sometimes obligated to post things. So you just have to take what you see people
I
post.
think most consumers are onto that. I would assume.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think anyone's buying the Thigh Master to shape their thighs,
Or that there's I had to laugh last time I was at the mall. They had this stand where it was I don't know, this like device on the ground that you stood on and it like vibrated and it was supposed to heal your back pain. And I was just like people were actually using it and
Oh,
I'm
I
just
think if you watch old like fitness gym footage from like whatever
Mhm.
20s, 30s, 40s, I don't even know what era, there was a machine that just shook you and that was supposed to shake the fat off you.
oh my God.
Yep.
It's like that. Do you remember that shake weight? Oh gosh, I think it was like 10 years ago. They had
Oh
that
yeah.
shake weight. Yeah, that was hilarious.
Every guy bought that for their friend. I must have got that as a gift 2 or 3 times as
Oh
like a
yeah.
joke. Oh yeah.
I think I got it as a white elephant gift one year because I thought
Yeah.
I remember getting it and being really disappointed because I thought it was like I thought it would vibrate on its own, but you had to like actually shake it.
Lexi, we don't need to know that.
Oh goodness.
There was
Okay.
an NFL player that bought one for like the whole team. Remember that, Evan? Like
Yep.
as a joke, he bought the
Yep.
whole team a shake weight. Yeah.
They were all doing it in the locker room. I remember that.
Yeah.
That's funny. All right. Well, okay, we got that sweat creams out of the way. Let's move on to what are your guys' thoughts on tracking your steps or paying attention to your need activity? Overrated or underrated?
Underrated.
I'd say way underrated.
Way
Yeah,
underrated.
agreed with both of you guys. Underrated for sure.
Because before I tracked my steps, I didn't realize how lazy I was.
Yeah. Well, it's easy to do if you're in, we've talked about it before on this podcast, but when you're in the depths of prep, your body gets so good at conserving energy. And you even like a lot of times you don't even realize it. Even things such as like hand gestures and moving, your arms and just moving, like your body starts to conserve that energy when you're so low body fat, not a lot of food. So I think there's a lot of benefit of tracking your steps, especially in prep.
It's probably the biggest change. When I first got into coaching, my coach never asked me how many steps I got or what I was doing. And I look back now and think, I did everything in my power to do the minimum, right? If I was
Mhm.
told that I had to do HIIT cardio 3 days a week and steady state cardio 3 days a week, that's all I did, to the point where I stopped doing the other things I was doing, playing basketball, playing ping pong, which sounds stupid, but playing ping pong for an hour, I used to break a sweat. And I remember being in prep and being like, no, I can't play ping pong anymore. I'm in prep. Like literally, I just created more work for myself in the gym because I stopped doing all the other things. So now, with the advent of, fitness trackers, you can kind of go, okay, yeah, you know, I'm only getting 3,000 steps a day. This is something that, we'll talk about with our clients too. Like if I have a client that's a personal trainer, they're getting 18,000 steps a day, probably not going to have to give that person cardio. Likewise, if I have a client that I'm like, track your steps, and they're like, yeah, I get 3,000 steps a day. I'm like, okay, this is going to be, we're going to have to just make you move more. Right. So, without that awareness, yeah, very, very underrated.
I mean, there's a reason that in every consult call I have with clients, I always ask just what does your day to day look like? Like, what's your, what do you do for work as far as are you sitting all day? Are you at a desk or are you a nurse? Are you a waitress? Are you a personal trainer? Are you getting in 20K, 1,000 steps every day? I think that is a really important piece of information for us to know, especially when we're prepping people.
Well, yeah, and for recovery too. Like if someone's getting 20, 25,000 steps a day, and then you give them 45 minutes or 2 hours of cardio on top of that, like, I mean, especially if low food's involved, like you can't do it. There's going to be no benefit to it
Well, the
at that point.
problem is, Evan, they can do it and they will do it. Like I've literally had clients check in after a couple of weeks and be like, Coach, I'm dying. And I'm like, what's going on? You're only doing 30 minutes of cardio. And they're like, well, no, but I've been going for hikes every day with I'm like, well, hold up. That's your cardio then. Like sometimes they separate everything like that. So,
Mhm.
people, competitors especially, will run themselves into the ground if they think it's going to make them better, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you got to be able to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
But
Agreed. Okay, well, this one, we talked about this one before we started this podcast episode. So let's talk about competing a lot as a topic of like underrated or overrated. So, Paul, thoughts?
This one's a big
dude,
if, or, situational. Competing a lot. I'm going to go with overrated. Um, Compete intelligently, but I don't think competing a lot is valuable. I think that's overrated.
Hmm.
the exact same answer. Um, Look, if you're trying to compete a lot to get a qualification for something, maybe like qualify for Olympian, you're right there, and there's a reason behind it. Sure. But outside of that, most people are either trophy hunting at that point. Um, and if you're in competition mode, you're probably not improving that much either. Your conditioning will improve for sure, show to show, to a certain point. But yeah, it's overrated for sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to go with overrated. And I think, Paul, you can probably speak a bit more to this because you obviously coach a lot of pros, but I would say it's probably very different too with like amateurs versus pros. Because obviously, when you're a pro, if your goal is to get Olympia qualified, there may be more of a benefit for competing, more often if you're on the cusp of qualifying or just to get more exposure in front of different judging panels or a different group of competitors. So can you kind of speak on that? Do you feel like for pros, sometimes it can be beneficial to compete a little bit more frequently if they're trying to chase that qualification?
Well, the other thing about the pro circuit is the judging changes from show to show, and I don't mean the criteria changes. I mean the judges' eyes, and you just learn certain judges like certain competitors, and so you start to maneuver based around that. So competing frequency for top level pros that are trying to get Olympia qualified, get Arnold invitations, trying to get feedback from certain judges. You know, something that I like to do with my girls before the Olympia is make sure they get in front of all the Olympia judges. If I can do that in a manner with the fewest shows possible, great. But sometimes I got to have them go do a couple different shows, right? So yeah, the frequency when you say competing all the time, there used to be this thing I used to hear about when I first got into coaching that was like you gotta earn your way to the top. You've got to do a lot of shows before you can get a pro card, and then you got to do a lot of shows before you can, you know, get to the Olympia. What I have seen the last couple of years is that is just not the case, right? There are situations where you can, you know, coaches are using their athletes to build their reputation and putting them in lots and lots of shows, and over time they're gradually getting worse or they're not showing up great at the big shows. And likewise the other case, you know, if you come out of the gate and show you're good, you don't need to keep doing tons of shows. You will progress and you will get rewarded. So it's very, very situational. You know, you could look at, I'll give you two complete opposite scenarios. I've got Lana Dunbar, who her first year out was immediately like third, second. Like we were always in the mix, but we were also in the top 3 for points. And every time she would jump into a show, an Olympian would just jump in at the last second and just take that first from her, right? And she kept getting the same feedback, like, you're right there, you're right there. She and I made a concerted effort. We said, hey, listen, we're in the points race. We're going for it, right? We did everything in our power. And I said, whether or not you make the Olympia, I don't want you to be like, oh man, I didn't go for it. So we did. We went for it. She ended up doing 13 shows in that year, and got to the Olympia and got her Olympia experience and had a great season. And she did great. She had a great rebound and all that. We took all of last year off. That was an extenuating circumstance. They've gotten rid of the points. Now it's just a win. Now they've actually changed the rules this year even further. This year, you put your contract in and the list comes out on Monday, and that's the show. There are no more late entries. So I think it's going to be very interesting. There's going to be some shows that are wide open with no Olympians, which you never, ever see, because every time the list comes out on Monday, and we all do this that are in the bikini world, the list comes out on Monday and you go, okay, who's jumping in?
Yep.
You know that somebody out there is hunting for that win or that paycheck that knows they can beat everybody on that list, and they just jump in. Well, that can't happen this year, right? If you're not willing to put up the time and energy to commit to a show beforehand, there's going to be some shows that are wide open. And then also you had, you know, the opposite end of the spectrum with Lana was last year, Ariana, who at her first show got 13th, at her second show got second, at her third show got first, and then 2 shows later she was at the Olympia, right? So if you're good, they're going to notice you, right? She went to Tampa. No, she was on nobody's radar. I knew. I was like, this girl's too good. She's too good. And I knew the feedback we got from Tampa or from Texas with Tyler and these top judges. They really liked her, but they wanted to see some slight changes. We go to Tampa and we had first place votes from both head judges. We didn't win. Ashlyn won, but to even be in that split middle call out, beating India Paulino, who placed second in Texas, where Ariana was 13th, you see how quickly that can shift. We took a month off. Had we just kept doing shows in between there, maybe she doesn't improve that much. So yeah, I don't think competing all the time, especially if you're not getting better, if you're not handling the post-show experience, if you're starting to feel run down, if you're starting to lose muscle, I mean, you got to talk about money. These shows aren't cheap.
Mhm.
You got to get makeup. You got to get flights.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I think if let's say a newer competitor getting into the sport thinks, or they're under the impression that you have to compete a lot to be successful, I mean, that can be kind of hard, considering, oh my God, how much money you're gonna have to spend on all these shows. But I do think that, I mean, I would not say 2 shows is a lot by any means, but I think I try to encourage my competitors or my girls to, if you're prepping, to try to do more than one show if you can, improve into the next show, like implement on your feedback after the first show. Now, of course, not everybody is able to do another show after their first one, but I do think that there can be some benefit to maybe doing a couple of shows in one season. Like, you work so hard to get stage lean, why not get on stage a few times and see if you can improve your package? But I definitely don't think you have to compete year round or even every year. I think a lot of competitors think that every year they have to step on stage to stay relevant or to be remembered, right? But you see people do that, and typically those are not all the time, but a lot of times you're going to see those people being the same people who just, they look the same every time, and they're not really improving. They just kind of, they look good, but they're not looking any different year after year.
I always say 2 shows. I mean, your second show is always going to be, without a doubt, better than your first, right? Unless you've done a bunch of shows and you've gotten feedback before. The first show, especially if you've had a while off, the anxiety around, when do I go to check-ins? What time do I get up for the show? How many meals should I eat? I'm backstage. Is somebody yelling at me? Like, the second show, that all goes away. It's much more enjoyable. You just really start to relax and just enjoy the day and walk on stage and have fun. So I always say 2 shows for sure.
Yeah.
But that
And
to me,
especially if it's, sorry, go ahead,
go ahead.
Paul.
Go.
No, especially if you're a newer competitor on it, especially first time competitors. A lot of times you'll go on stage the first time and be incredibly nervous. And by the time finals rolls around, you're like, oh, I can do this. This is nothing. And that's in one day.
Yeah.
That's in one day. Imagine how that's going to be on your next show. You're going to be so much looser, so much more relaxed. You're going to go in there smiling and happy, not stressed.
Oh yeah. Yep, I agree. And I mean, that's not that this is like the topic we were talking about, but that's also why typically, if you're a first time competitor, because I know we have a lot that listen to this podcast, I will always recommend do at least bare minimum true novice and open. If you can do novice as well, awesome. But as a first time competitor, usually you'll step on stage in that true novice division and you'll feel really nervous. But by the end of that, you'll get a little bit of those jitters out, and then you step on for novice, and then you feel even more confident. And then by the time open comes on, you feel like your jitters are kind of almost non-existent at that point.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the truth. Even I've seen girls come back to finals just with a different,
100%.
just
Yeah.
the everything's washed off, the anxiety's gone. My favorite would have been Savannah Finley, who, our first show together was the Clash a couple years ago, and at prejudging, she was literally like shaking, and she was like, "Will you please stand by me and tell me where to go?" At prejudging, and her suit bunched up, and at prejudging, she was kind of a mess. Well, after prejudging, I had her go take a shower, reapply her tan. She got her suit fixed. I remember CJ helped her with her suit, and she came back to finals a different athlete, and she ended up winning the overall in all 3 of her classes, which, if they had done finals in the morning, she probably wouldn't have won the overall in maybe novice or open. But that she came back and she looked a little better. Her color was a little better. She was more confident. And it was just a matter of a few hours, but it's just that it's hard to anticipate the nerves that go along with the lights and the judges and it's hard.
Yeah, it is. And you can never anticipate either how the flow is going to go with the show, right? So we can take this past year. I remember Republic of Texas was, I mean, you remember, Paul, the amateur bikini didn't go on until 2 p.m., right? And then,
Texas has so many men competing.
I
Usually if
know.
you do a show, your bikinis last, you go, oh, okay, if the show starts at 9, it'll be on by 11 or 12. Not in Texas. There are classic physique, men's physique, bodybuilders. Like, those shows are massive.
Yeah. And then, I mean, a month later, Tampa Pro, I remember, was so quickly. And I mean, it's not a small show either. You would assume it would, not be a
But the
lot.
numbers are reversed. Florida has way more women, so they go through those men quickly.
Well, and I remember this year at Tampa Pro, they did that they didn't do individuals at prejudging,
Right.
remember? So that's why it was so quick. So it's sometimes you can't anticipate that either. So always just, I think, be backstage when prejudging starts, even if you have to camp out, just to ease your nerves.
Yeah, it's always interesting from show to show, and that's one reason I love being there, is because you just give them that reassurance and that calmness on how to behave.
Yes. And I think just going as coaches, us going to shows, you learn over time kind of the ins and the outs of each show, so to say. So, okay, next thing would be getting judges' feedback post show. Overrated or underrated?
Underrated. Well, in most cases, underrated.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's underrated.
I would say very underrated. And I'm always shocked when I talk to people. If I'll have a consult with someone, they'll be like, yeah, my last show was North Americans. I'm like, oh, did you get feedback from Sandy? No. I'm like, oh,
And Sandy is the one that's like notorious for always staying after
well,
shows.
she has changed the entire expectation, I think, for judges. Because now Tyler, Attila, Joe Pishkula, Bernadette, they're all staying after now. And in
Mhm.
fact, at some of the bigger shows, the judges are going backstage during finals
Mhm.
so that people don't have to stick around till the show is over. Um, so yeah, it like Evan said, it comes down to like where you're competing, but I'm typically putting my competitors in front of good judges, even at the local
Yeah.
level. So that feedback is invaluable. It's how you become a better coach, a better athlete. Um, it's you got to remove the lens of your ego on the sport, and it took me a while, and I still look back at images of like say Daraj, and I look back and I go, oh my God, I used to think that was the look, and look what like
Mhm.
now I can see it without that lens that I had on my face. You get lens, you get like coach goggles, I call them, where you're just like you see your client in such a positive light, which is awesome, but you've got to see it from the judge's perspective, and it's very easy to do. And everybody listening to this podcast, I'll tell you how fast it happens. Go to a show where you have a friend of yours competing. I guarantee you're going to watch their class come out, you're going to be like, she looked great. You won't even notice half the other competitors. It's happened to me before, where I've been like, nah, she looks great, and then they come out and they start doing call outs, and I'm like, where'd that girl come from? Holy
Mhm.
crap, she looks amazing. You just get that lens, and that's what getting feedback helps you stop doing that.
I
Yeah.
absolutely think it does. I think it determines what show you go to. And Paul, of course, like the people you go to and the people most people we put shows in, we put them in shows for a reason. But for just general competitors that go, there's a few things to think about and look for. The first thing is to make sure that you actually listen to what that judge says and gives you feedback. I can't tell you how many times I've sat there with athletes and heard what the judge says and then talked to them about him after, and they don't even what they heard was not actually anything that the judge said. They
Mhm.
heard the one negative part and forgot all of the positives the judge was saying too, because they were either upset about their placing or what they thought they should have done better. And they had that lens on when they went in there. Now, if you can go there with your coach, that's really beneficial too, because some judges don't put into words exactly what they mean in a way that's easily understandable. And all of us can listen to it and kind of read between the lines on what they mean by it. But for some people, that can be a little bit tough. And for some judges, you'll hear feedback and I'll just like shake my head and be like, that's not applicable to anything at all, like at all. And sometimes people get feedback and they'll give you feedback because they just have to give you feedback, but it wouldn't have changed your placing at all. You just need to be better all the way around. So learning kind of to understand that and read between the lines is really, really helpful. And that's why obviously being with a coach that's been in a sport for a while that knows who to go get the feedback from. I know we all have specific judges that we say, hey, if this person's at the show, get feedback from this judge, right? Because they give you good applicable feedback. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it is incredibly underrated. I think everyone should do it, especially if it's a national level judge, to go up there and that way they can put a face to the name too. And they know you care. And next time they see you on stage, they're gonna have the likelihood of them remembering you is much, much higher than if you were just number 123 in Group B.
Yeah, yeah. I think if your coach isn't there with you, a good thing to do if you can get that feedback in person is like put like your voice memo on or just put a video on. That way you can
Mhm.
catch the audio and send it to your coach because kind of alluding to what Evan was just talking about for those that may want an example of kind of what we mean when we say you have to sometimes read between the lines would be, if a judge tells you, oh, you need to be fuller, right? That could maybe mean, okay, maybe you need more muscle, but that may also mean you needed to pump up a little bit better and you didn't you need to peak a little bit differently, right? So it can mean two different things, but it's like the same feedback they're giving you, but it can mean two different things depending on the athlete. So that's why it's kind of an example of what Evan was just talking about. That's why I think if your coach isn't there and you get that in-person feedback, just put your voice memo on or do a video. That way you can have that audio saved and then send it to your coach. Now, if for some reason you can't get feedback from the judge right then and there on the spot, like after a show, because sometimes it happens, you can always email them once the stage shots are up. However, I mean, it's always going to be better to get that feedback in person, but if that's not an option, email I would say would be the next best thing. And usually if you're not familiar with who the head judge was, or what their email is, that's something I feel like you should be able to go to your coach and ask them for.
One
Yeah.
more thing I wanted to piggyback off with that too is, and that's a really good idea, having that recorded so we can kind of read between the lines on things. Case in point, I had a athlete last year that just didn't have enough muscle. She has beautiful shape, beautiful lines, taller girl, but just didn't quite have enough muscle. And the initial feedback was, well, you could have been a little bit tighter. And I knew she could have been a little bit tighter, but I knew if she was, we would run the risk of looking like gaunt and thin. And I asked him, because I was there and I already knew what the answer was because I've been doing this long enough. But I asked him, I said, yeah, but if she's a little more conditioned, he goes, yeah, you run the risk of looking too thin. He's like, I think this is the best, probably all around package you could bring, because I asked one more question on top of that.
Yeah, one of my favorite follow-ups, especially when you're coaching at the pro level, the girls will really hyperfixate on one piece of feedback they get, right? Like, you need to be fuller, you need to be harder, you need to be. And sometimes my feedback, my question back to the judge will be, had we done that today, would it have mattered? And the answer is quite often no. You're not beating this person, even if you fix that. Sometimes there's such a thing as just a better competitor, right? And so, it's the higher you go up in the sport, that's kind of where you're going to get. The lower you are in the sport, you can overcome somebody's structure and beauty because you're conditioned on that day. But as you go up in the sport, everyone's going to be conditioned and have muscle and structure, and then it's genetics is going to take over, and it's going to be like, well, you can't change your tie-ins, you can't change your shape of your waist, you can't change the width of your shoulders, you can't, like there are certain things that, so don't hyperfixate on something that's not going to result in a better placing for you. I've had girls be told, you need to be a little fuller, you're a little too hard. And so we come in a little fuller and we drop placings. And it turns out that the look that they want for that competitor is just a little bit harder. It's a better look for them. So they went from second to sixth because we tried to come in a little softer. And they're like, yeah, no, not the right look, right? So trying to fix something that wasn't going to change anything now, that's probably expert level feedback that you have to worry about that. With what we're talking about, the feedback that you want to get from these judges, even Sandy, like if you email her, she'll often send you the class winner or the overall winner from your show next to you and go, here's where you could have, especially if it's a national show or a pro show, she does that a lot. So she'll actually say, well, see here, the winner has a little more size on their quads, a little better shape, whatever it might be. And so that can give you great, especially like when it gets time to go to the gym, you can make sure that you're connecting with those muscles really well that you got to grow.
Yeah, she's great. I don't know how she does everything she does. Like, she's amazing.
She makes the sport so much better, and I'm so excited we get to have her on the podcast.
Yes.
Probably going to be 2 hours. Yeah.
I know. I'm so excited for that. Stay tuned for that. Yes. So, okay. So a couple more I'll pull from here. So let's talk about tracking sodium. I know I've gotten this question a couple times from competitors or people like, that are newer to working with me. What are your guys' thoughts on tracking your sodium daily? Overrated or underrated?
Daily or
Just tracking it in general. We're talking like in the general scheme of things, not just peak week, because I know we all,
okay.
yeah, not just peak week, but let's say a competitor is, they're starting prep, they're 15 weeks out, just tracking sodium in general.
It's overrated if you're talking in general, but it is important to have sodium in your diet at a good amount. So,
Yeah.
I would say it's overrated, but having low sodium or no sodium is a bad idea too. So,
Yeah, I'd say it's overrated from the perspective of you don't want to get too granular with like the minutia of prep. But I'd say most people probably underconsume sodium. So if you're avoiding it, if someone's like, oh yeah, coach, I'm averaging 800 milligrams of sodium a day, I'm like, hold up. We got to be at least 3,000 milligrams a day. You're an athlete, right? And they're like, oh, and they start salting their food and they're like, oh, I feel better. But I also don't want them, harping on like, oh, I hit my macros, but my sodium was over by 500 milligrams. I don't want that either. I don't want that. Now for peak week, yeah, but that can be accomplished very easily. Keep your foods the same, season them the same, and then we can manipulate it that way. But I'd say tracking sodium is not something I want my clients doing on a regular basis.
And it's
Yeah.
I could tell you that one of the biggest differences that helps a lot of people when they train, because people don't understand sodium is one of the parts of hydration, right? It's an electrolyte, it's very important. Is just having people like consume like an element salt pack or something like that before they train. It'll completely change the way your brain feels, how your training goes. It's
Well,
like,
since our podcast is sponsored by Core Nutritionals, I don't have them here, but Core makes
oh
a great
yes,
packet called Hydrate.
Oh, they
there you go.
are so good. I tried their flavors at the Olympia this past year. Oh, I was probably at that
Yeah,
table.
the blue raspberry is so delicious. So yeah, those again, but what's funny is the first time I did that, I put it in my pre-workout and drank it. And I remember like halfway through the workout being like, what is going on? Like I felt like super tight. And I was like, oh, I drank that hydrate packet. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Typically, if I have clients that are, actually, I had a check in this morning and she was like, hey, I'm struggling to get a pump. So typically say, we'll look at water, carbs before they train, but adding a little bit of just salt or an electrolyte packet before they train, that can make all the difference. But yeah, I think in the grand scheme of things, tracking sodium, if you're, I don't know, 15, 16 weeks out, like tracking it to the morsel, I feel like that's just going to stress somebody out, and the key with sodium is just keeping it consistent day to day. But
Yep.
you do want to make sure you are getting in enough, because I think, especially if you're eating a lot of whole foods, and you're not salting your meals, your sodium is probably going to be really low. So you need to make sure, if you're eating a lot of just whole foods that don't really have any sodium by nature, you should be salting your meals or having, an electrolyte packet daily, just to help to make sure your sodium is within a healthy range. Because if it's not, you're probably going to start to notice, more muscle cramps, may feel a little lightheaded at times, and then that's a good sign that you're probably not consuming enough sodium.
Well, there's also, some of the presentations we did this weekend, low sodium can actually have an impact on the female cycle. Like, so you can have worse PMS symptoms, right? Low sodium is also associated with insulin sensitivity. So a lot of these bad prep plans that we see where they're like, here's your meal plan, don't salt, don't add, condiments for like months, right? That's where, you'll start to see these people run into problems with digestion, with their cycle being painful or just not having it. So yeah, do not restrict sodium unless told to do so by a doctor.
Yes. Yes. All right. Okay, I've got two more. So we'll do this one, I think will be quick, and then the last one I think Evan will like. So the next one is apple cider vinegar. And I just put this on the list because I've seen this in a lot of plans. Because typically if I get a new client and they came from like a meal plan approach, I'll just ask them to like send me their meal plan so I can have that as a frame of reference. And I see like apple cider vinegar, like concoctions. I feel like a lot of people will put that in a client's meal plan, like first thing in the morning, fasted. So what are your guys' thoughts on ACV in the morning?
Bro, that is the fastest way to lose $10 to $12 a week. Gotcha.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, I definitely think it's overrated. I mean, hey, if it works for you and you, like, going back to what we said earlier, like placebo effect, if you like doing it, if you feel like your digestion improves, okay, cool. I don't think it's gonna hurt you, but like Paul said, I think it's a great way to just waste some money, and it's not the best tasting at all.
I'll
I
be
mean,
honest, I've never done it. So
I've never
here
done it straight, but
I have. Here's the thing with that. There's just things that matter and things that don't. And that's just one thing that doesn't matter. Like, and people will do things like, I'll have this apple cider vinegar thing in the morning and negate the 95% of other things that are 10 times more important.
right, right.
But
Yep.
I did that one thing because it's easy and I can remember it. So
Uh,
no, it's overrated, obviously.
yeah, little, yeah, definitely very overrated. Okay, the last one I want to talk about is, and this is the one I think Evan will like elaborating on, training to failure. Overrated or underrated?
Underrated.
You know, that's a tough one for me because so in my mind, I assume everyone does it. And the research is very clear. You do not have to train to failure to make progress. However, I think it's a valuable tool to use. So I don't, yeah, would I say it's overrated or underrated?
Mine comes with a caveat, of course.
Yeah, I think if you're too caught up in the evidence-based approach and you never train to failure, then it's underrated. And if you get a plan where you do every set to failure, it's overrated, right? You gotta use it intelligently.
I 100% agree. And like a great example is I had a client check in yesterday and she does Brett's program. She does Booty by Brett. And we were talking a little bit about her training and she's saying she's like almost going to like failure on everything. And I think now that's a case where, yeah, training to failure is definitely overrated. I don't think you should be training to failure on everything you're doing every time you're in the gym. But I think it is a very valuable tool to actually feel what true failure feels like and to have that as kind of a baseline. And then you can usually work, with a better RPE intent when you are actually doing your normal lifts.
Most people have no idea actually what failure looks like. That's number one. Like they don't have a clue.
I
I
know
can
you
tell you when
say
I've trained with
that.
most people, and especially females, when it comes to things, they have 5 or 6 reps left. It's not remotely close to
I mean,
failure.
that's
Not
also
remotely
quite evident
close.
in the literature when they test, more novice lifters on what their failures or ask them, they're way off. That
Way
definitely
off.
comes with experience. So yeah, from that perspective, definitely there is value in learning your limits,
But
and
when,
pushing through. Um, yeah. So
when I see people say, "Oh, I can train like 5, 6 days a week," I'm like, "Then you're training almost no days a week because you're getting very little to failure there." Now, you cannot train to failure all the time. That is impossible. If you do train to failure, you may be able to train 4 days a week. Maybe if the split's correct with that. Um, this is definitely more of an advanced thing to look at when it comes to training. But being able to mix, like having a few reps in reserve and understanding what true failure is really beneficial because like John Meadows said it best. It's like you want to dig yourself in a hole, but you don't want to dig yourself a grave. And finding out what that is different for each person. It's different
yeah,
based on your nutrition. It's different based off your lifting style. It's different based on your execution of the movement. It's different based on how old you are. It's different based on supplementation. It's different for a million different factors with that. Um, so that's why you could say you can have the perfect plan that's laid out, but if someone doesn't understand how to execute that plan,
yeah.
then it doesn't really matter.
You can give the same lifting plan to two different people, and one will report like, "Oh, I was done in 30 minutes and I didn't get a workout," and the other one will be like, "Oh
Mhm.
my God, I that was so good.
This
I
volume's
feel
way
so
too high.
great." And
It can be
literally,
much. Yeah.
like, honestly, the best training plans look very basic on paper, but it's all about how you execute. 3 sets of 8 looks very easy on paper. It can be very different in the gym with the right trainer or with the right mindset. That's so that I fully understand where Evan is coming from. Learning to deal with a little bit of pain in the gym, especially on bigger movements like lower body, where your lungs and your head are going to give out before the muscle does. That's something that has to be learned. Or maybe you're a freak of nature that can't train to failure, or you're going to put on too much muscle. So, you know, that it's hard to give like absolutes, but that's why Evan and I have a different answer here. We have the same thought process, but you know, Evan's probably dealing with more people that he's just shaking his head at, and I'm dealing with more people that are running themselves into the ground when I meet them, and
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't need you going to failure on your warm-ups.
Right. Plus,
I, I, I,
I feel
I
like you
ran.
Evan, are used to seeing a lot. Like I know you train a lot at MI40, and I feel like you're used to seeing a lot of the big bodybuilders. They're training like to complete failure, so that's just kind of what you're used to seeing too.
Yeah, and there's a difference between training to complete failure and training to look like you're training to complete failure too. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of people screaming, making a bunch of noise, and it's not even to failure. It's they think it might be. but it's not definitely not. And it's funny you said that, Paul, because I did have one client because I she sent me an email yesterday and said that she is just absolutely fried. Her body is like shutting down. Her food is very high. She's only training lower body twice a week. And she said, these 3 hard glute workouts a week are just too much. I'm like, why are you doing 3 hard glute workouts a week? Like the last day of the workout is supposed to be a high rep, nothing remotely close to failure. Almost like, I hate the word active recovery, but something similar to that. But in her mind, she wanted to be as good as she could, and she thought if she pressed harder on that day, that was going to get better results. When actually, it's counterintuitive to that.
Setting her back a
So,
little.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's actually setting her back. So we had to take a full deload to be able to let her body recover with
Yep.
that, which we wouldn't have had to do that necessarily if she would have backed off on that 3rd day. But eventually, the fatigue catches up to a point to where you have to force your body's going to tell you, yeah, we're screwed here. We're screwed.
Yeah, it's like you can get away with it for a little bit of time and then all of a sudden it backfires on you.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, I think that's the entire list that I wanted to get through, and we've been on here for a good amount of time. So, anything else you guys wanted to chat about?
No, but there's more of those. I think it would be cool if we just rolled in and did another one of these next week or the week out. I think this is a really great
Well,
topic that can be informative to a lot of people.
I agree, and I actually I just made this list myself. So I think what we could do is we could always put a little question box on Instagram,
Yeah.
some ideas from people, because I would be curious to hear what are some things that you guys as listeners maybe you're curious about. Is this overrated? Is this underrated? Yeah, I think this would be a cool series.
I'm in. I'm in. I like, I thought the one thing nice about the season starting is that the content just kind of comes very naturally. Like we're going to be at a show in a few days, and there's going to be some things that come up and things that I hear, and I'll be like, oh, that's a good topic. People are asking me about something, and we work with varying, clients of varying experience levels. Obviously, Lexi, you probably have a few more newer athletes than I do. I have a few more experienced athletes, so we have different perspectives. And Evan has like a wide array there too. So I think it's always good to discuss these topics from that perspective. From, the one thing I've noticed over the last couple of years is that competitors tend to have a preconceived notion about what they're going to see on stage. They're like, Coach, I don't know if I should do this show. I'm not ready. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I just I don't look ready. And I'm like, you look ready. Who are you looking at? Well, I look at Amy, I look at Daraja. I'm like, okay, that's the problem. They
Yeah.
are not going to be at your show. You are a true novice. Talia last year, DeLuca, I could tell she was like nervous about doing her first show. And I was like, I promise you, when you're backstage lined up with the true novices and the open, you're going to feel very confident. You look incredible. And she's like, okay, let's do the show. So going to shows is probably the most valuable tool you have in your arsenal. Just watch the people walk out. If you go to the Arnold and watch the 11 girls walk out and you think that's the division, you're way off. That's the 11 of the top 15 in the world.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons why I love our group here on this podcast is we all share a lot of commonalities, right? Like same morals, but we all are a little bit different, like in, I don't know, just personality approaches. And so I think that's what makes this podcast so great is that, it would be boring if we all just had the same opinion, cut and dry about everything,
Yeah, but I'm right.
Yeah, Paul's always right.
Always.
Always.
Boss man, always right.
I win.
All
All
right.
right. Well, thank you guys for joining us for the ProPhysique code. Be sure to, this is probably not going to come out till after the Arnold.
Yeah, it'll be the Monday after Arnold, so.
All right. So be sure to check out when are we doing the interview with Sandy?
Sandy Williamson is going to be on the podcast at the end of March. It's March 19th, I believe. So that's a Tuesday. That's
Oh, okay. So before the Clash, which she is judging. So that'll be good
yeah.
timing.
Yeah. So we'll definitely, I think before we put that or before we interview her, maybe put a post up on our code account or something, just asking if anybody has any specific questions. Cause I definitely want to write out some interview questions for her. So it flows really well.
Yeah. Sandy is a talker. Like you give her a topic and, first time I ever got on the phone with her, I think it was an hour. She's going to explain things. So, yeah, I think I really want to focus on her journey in the sport, because I think the message that comes from her that's so powerful is the power of muscle on women for long-term health. That's
Mhm.
what she always brings this sport down to. You know, you'll often see her backstage, and a girl, or, you know, a woman will be like, you know, I'm 54 with 4 kids, and she's like, look at you. You didn't win, but would you just look at you? And she'll even start crying sometimes.
You know what's funny is on that topic last night, Becky Clausen and Sandy went live on Instagram, and I caught a little bit of it, and they actually talked. They were like, and it's crazy that they remember so many people. But they were referencing a lady who was like 50 or something like years ago at a show, and they were just like they remembered her, and they were like, she came up for feedback, she got fourth at her national show, and we were just so amazed, like she was 50 and she got fourth in her open class, and it was just so amazing. So
Yeah.
yeah.
They have good memories, especially Sandy. I've bumped into her many a time and thought, she doesn't remember this, and nope, she remembers it very clearly. So,
Mhm.
yep. All right,
Awesome.
well, that'll do it. So that'll give us something to look forward to, and we'll also be able to review the Pro Arnold. That's probably our next one,
Yeah.
if we can Tuesday, just because we're all going to be there in person watching it with our eyes, so we can do a recap. I think everybody's eyes are on Lauralee right now. She's probably the heavy favorite. She's looking incredible. Amy's coming off back-to-back 6th places. You've got the return of 2-time Bikini Olympia champion Angelica Teixeira, who's had 2 babies. She looks incredible right now. I
She
think
looks
that's going to
wild.
be so fun to see.
That's going to be really cool. I don't know about you guys, but I've caught little glimpses of her YouTube channel. And from what I've gauged recently, it
Yep.
actually looks like she's feeding into the show. So she's like, it
Yep.
looks like her macros right now is like a week ago where they're really high, and she's actually trying to like fill out and feed into the show. So
Yep.
I'm really excited to see what she
I
shows.
saw her in person doing interviews, and we chatted briefly at Nationals, and that was in December 12th.
Okay.
You could see in her face she was lean then, right?
Really.
So she's been lean for a while now. So
And she's actually, I didn't realize that she said she's coaching herself too. So I
yeah,
thought
yep,
that was really neat. So
yep, yep. So she's learned a lot about herself over the years, and so I think that's a cool thing too.
yeah.
All right, well, you know what? Maybe I'll you know what?
What?
Angelica on the podcast. Hmm.
Ooh, she would be a fun
I'll
one.
Yeah, she's always super chatty, and we DM and we chat. So like, yeah, maybe that'd be a good one to have. I just love her journey. When she was on Jay's podcast, a lot of that I didn't know, and I was like, wow. So,
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
all right, well, I'll see you all Thursday.
See you
Sounds
bright and
good.
early on Thursday.
All right, bye.
Bye.
See ya.